Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, think for just a second about the single most common piece of financial advice you've ever received, right? From the time we're little kids dropping pennies into a piggy bank, we're told basically one thing: save your money. Save for a rainy day, save for the future. But what if the very act of just saving your money is exactly the thing keeping you from building real wealth? Well, today we're exploring a pretty powerful story that challenges absolutely everything we've been taught about that trusty piggy bank.
Okay, let's dive into this. Never save money. Make money grow. I mean, wow. This paradox completely upends conventional wisdom, doesn't it? And here's the kicker. This isn't advice from some hotshot Wall Street banker. These were the shocking words spoken by a grandfather to his grandson in a small village. This idea right here serves as the absolute core of our explainer today. To understand why he said this and why it might literally change the way you look at your own bank account, we really have to look at the painful journey that led him to this massive realization.
So let's start with part 1, Dreams Don't Feed, Chapter 1. Our story begins with a man who, well, wasn't exactly known for his stellar work ethic.
In his younger days, the grandfather in our story was actually called lazy by the folks in his village. He'd just sit under a big tree every single day, look up at the sky, and dream. He'd tell people, one day I'm going to open a shop. One day I'll buy cows. One day I'll be rich. But notice how those lazy days turned into months, and those months just dragged on into years. That one day he talked about, it never arrived. He only dreamed. He never actually worked. And eventually, the inevitable happened. The money was completely 100% gone.
The real turning point came on a night when the cupboards were entirely bare. The old man's little grandson, who was thin, barefoot, and hungry, came up to him and softly asked, "Grandpa, do we have bread?" The grandmother opened the cupboard and there was nothing. No bread, no rice, nothing. That moment just shattered the grandfather's heart. He was struck by a really harsh reality. Dreams are beautiful, but dreams alone do not feed a family. His empty stomach and heavy mind finally pushed him to make a massive, life-altering shift.
The very next morning, he became a field laborer. And let me tell you, the reality of this labor was brutal. He worked under the scorching sun, lifted heavy tools, his back ached, his feet burned, his hands grew rough. But despite this grueling physical labor, he quickly discovered a pretty sad truth. I mean, he was earning money for beans and tortillas, sure, but as soon as the money came in, it went right back out. Food, medicine, and bills instantly consumed his small earnings. Despite working himself to the bone, the roof still leaked, and that underlying threat of hunger just wouldn't go away. He was working incredibly hard, but he wasn't getting ahead. The structural problem of his poverty still entirely unsolved.
This brings us to a critical phase in his financial education, and honestly, perhaps the trap most of us fall into at some point. Part 2, The Illusion of Saving, Chapter 2.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real price he paid. One day at the village store, he overheard some men saying that saving money is the absolute secret to safety. So he found a glass jar and hid it under his bed. Think about the stark contrast of this sacrifice. To hear the clinking of coins in that hidden glass jar, he wore old shoes with holes in them, and the family ate less food, sometimes just staring at almost empty plates. When his wife asked why they were staying hungry just to save money, he told her she'd understand one day. He proudly looked at that jar and called it our tomorrow.
After months of painful sacrifice, the jar was finally full. Welcome to Chapter 3, The Reality of Inflation. The grandfather felt this massive sense of pride, right? He felt safe, he felt completely ready for the future. So he took his jar full of hard-earned savings to the market, slammed the money on the table, and confidently asked the shopkeeper for 3 sacks of corn.
But the shopkeeper just shook his head. He looked at the grandfather and delivered a devastating blow. The money in the jar, which the grandfather had literally starved his family to save, was only enough to buy 1.5 sacks of corn. Not 3, just 1.5. No way, right?
So, why did this happen? Well, it's because of an invisible force we all know: inflation. It's when money loses value and things get more expensive over time. While the grandfather was burying his money in a jar under his bed, the prices of goods in the real world were going up. The shopkeeper told him simply, prices went up. The grandfather was absolutely shocked to learn that money can actually lose value. And guys, this is incredibly relevant to all of us today. When you just hoard cash, its purchasing power decays over time. By trying to play it entirely safe, the grandfather's saving strategy actually left him totally vulnerable to an expensive world.
Defeated but observant, the grandfather sat outside one quiet evening. He watched his neighbors walking by, one carrying eggs, another carrying milk. They weren't stressed out, they looked peaceful. And that simple observation planted a tiny seed of an idea. This marks the beginning of Part 4, The Egg Factory, Chapter 4.
So, the crucial point is the huge shift in his mindset that happens right here. He looks at his grandson and asks one simple, brilliant question. What if we buy chickens? Bam!
He completely pivots away from the failed defensive strategy of hoarding cash under a bed and moves toward an offensive strategy, buying assets that actually produce value. He took what was left of his saved money, and instead of leaving it dead in a jar, he bought a few thin chickens.
Let's map out exactly how this builds into a legitimate financial engine. This is the compounding cycle. Step 1, he bought the initial asset, the thin chickens. Step 2, the asset produced a yield. They collected eggs. Now, importantly, they didn't consume all their profits. They ate some, for sure, but they sold some too. Step 3, this is the magic right here. They took the money from the sold eggs and reinvested it right back into more chickens, which naturally leads to Step 4, the living egg factory grows. Slowly the chickens multiplied and slowly the money grew along with them.
But we have to be super clear about something. Investing isn't just some magic trick that happens while you sleep. Look at how he actually managed this growth. He kept diligent notes in a small book. He counted every single coin earned and every egg sold. His neighbors transformed into his regular customers. This was active management. He was finally working, but instead of breaking his back for wages that just disappeared to bills, he was working to build his own future. For the first time in his entire life, he felt real pride and genuine financial security.
Which brings us to the culmination of his journey. Part 5, Make Money Grow, the final lesson.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how sharply these two financial paths contrast. One day, the grandfather holds an egg in his hand and tells his grandson that this egg is far more powerful than a jar of money. Why? Well, because as we see in Path 1, saving cash is like holding water in your hands. No matter how tightly you squeeze, inflation and time ensure it's going to slowly slip away. But Path 2, investing, is entirely different. When money is used the right way, to buy assets, to build something, it grows like life itself. It multiplies.
And that brings us right back to his ultimate lesson. A lesson born from hunger, hard labor, and finally, a true financial awakening. Never only save money. Invest. Grow. Even a small start can change your life. It didn't take a massive fortune to begin, right? It started with just a few thin chickens. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to look at your own financial habits and ask yourself honestly. Is your money trapped in a jar, slowly leaking away like water in your hands? Or are you planting seeds, investing, and building your own living factory for the future?